What is going on, Jeff fans? Matt O'Leary back with another video. Today I want to get into an interview with Eli Huff, who covers the University of Missouri for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Great conversation, kind of just at this time now, want to get into some deep dives into these prospects and, hear it from someone who covered them in college. And we'll get started with the Jets' first round pick, Armand Membou. All right, I'd like to welcome on Eli Huff, who covers the University of Missouri for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Eli, I really appreciate you joining me today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So the New York Jets used their first round pick on Armand Membou out of Missouri. He spent 3 years there, played over 800 snaps the last 2 years. Kind of just wanted to get from you to start here how his game improved kind of year over year and how he ended up being a top 10 pick in the NFL draft.
Yeah, it improved a lot year over year, and especially when you look at from where he was 3-4 years ago as a high school prospect. He's someone who, as a high school prospect coming out of the Kansas City area, went to a high school that's full of future NFL talent and current NFL talent in the Lee Summit area. He was the number 6 or 7 prospect in the state of Missouri when he was out there. He wasn't a blue chip prospect. He was someone who seemed like he'd be, he certainly had the potential to be an SEC offensive lineman, but would need to grow in that. Now, he became a whole lot more than that, as evidenced by him being a top 10 pick. He's someone who came in his freshman season, was a depth lineman for Missouri, but by the end of that was starting at right tackle. He held down that job for his sophomore season, held it down for his junior season, and now he's in the NFL. So it's been a really rapid rise. He went from someone who was a little raw when he was first coming in, which of course you expect when you're throwing a true freshman on the offensive line, to someone whose athleticism really came along as he got in the weight room and was working there, and then wound up becoming a really polished blocker, both in pass pro and in especially the outside zone. That's a staple of Missouri's offense. So just a ton of development for him over the course of his 3 years at Missouri.
Now, one of the reasons why I thought Membou was such a good pick for the New York Jets is because he pretty much exclusively played right tackle at Missouri, and the Jets desperately needed to find a right tackle in this draft. But, obviously if he went to another team, maybe circumstances would have been different. Essentially my question is, was there any indication during his time at Missouri if he could play left tackle or the left side of the line if he needed to?
So he never did at Missouri anyway, at least in the parts of practice and that we saw and certainly in the games. I think if there's positional versatility for him, it's more that he'd be able to bounce inside to right guard. The thinking for a while was that Mizzou was using him at right tackle, but that if he was going to make the jump to the next level, he would have to do that as a guard because he's on the smaller end for tackles. That was one of the things going into the pre-draft testing cycle for him was, will he measure at a size that's enough to play tackle at the next level? So it seems like guard would be a little more natural. But again, he didn't play that in a game for Missouri. It was just right tackle. So he's someone now, the counter to all of this, he's young. He was born in 2004, which is kind of crazy that these people who are born in 2004 are in the league now. So, if the Jets want to retrain him on the left side or retrain him at right guard, he could probably get there. He's young enough, but it was exclusively right tackle for Missouri.
Gotcha. Yeah, for the Jets, they took, I'm not sure how familiar you are with their roster, not expecting you to be, but they took Olu Fashanu in the first round last year, who, left tackle at Penn State. He played left tackle last year. I don't think they're going to mess with that, but just kind of was interested to hear if you thought there was any position flexibility there. Now, you did mention his athleticism, which for me, watching him, that's the first thing that really jumps off the page to me is the athleticism. How do you think that helps him translate to the next level in the NFL?
Yeah, I think it will help him a lot just because I think that's one of the bigger transitions for college players to the pros, where obviously a lot of, if you're at an SEC program, you're surrounded by a lot of great athletes, but the NFL is another level of that. And that's just at the NFL level, I don't think you can compensate for athleticism all that much. You just have to have a certain threshold there. And he's someone who spent the last 2 years on the freaks list. Bruce Feldman at The Athletic, who puts together that list. Armand Membou was on there. He can, a couple of years ago, who knows what he could do now. He could squat 600 a couple of years ago. I think a lot of folks probably saw his 40. If you haven't seen it from the combine, go back and watch that. It's kind of funny, but he is hauling. Now, will the Jets be asking their right tackle to sprint 40 yards downfield? Probably not, but it does show how quickly he can explode out of his stance. He can get downhill a little bit if he's someone who you want blocking up to the next level. The bigger thing for me is just he has the power, he has the base, all of that, and then he has the technique needed to come along during college, and it got there during his junior season, his final season, to a point where he was really comfortable. And again, I go back to what I said to the last question. He was born in 2004. He's incredibly young for a lineman in this draft. If it looks like he's 2 years behind somebody else, it's because he's 2 years younger than a lot of these rookies who are coming in at a lineman spot. So some of that technique stuff can come, but the athleticism is 100% there.
Now, I'm glad that you mentioned, too, the outside zone and running team, because that feels like that's what Missouri did a lot of. And with the New York Jets bringing in Tanner Engstrand as their offensive coordinator this year, it seems like they're going to get back to that and being much more of a zone blocking running team. What worked so well for him in that scheme?
Yeah, this is something that is it's bread and butter isn't even the right word for the Missouri offense. It's just what Missouri does in the run game and has the entire time that Armand Membou was here. So he's very used to it by now. And what I think is also a pro for him there, he did it with different players at right guard too. He didn't always have the same guy next to him. And that's one of the things that I've seen Missouri drill so much with the zone is not just the blocking technique, but to block the zone well, you have to be in lockstep with the guy next to you, who's in lockstep with the guy next to him. It's such a coordinated effort, and that's what he really became so good at, of just being in sync there, setting that edge and being the anchor there. So he's got a ton of familiarity, and again, that's where the athleticism helps, because sometimes you need your right tackle when you're running outside zone to be able to get out there a little bit, right? He can certainly do that. He's a good blocker for duo schemes as well. Missouri did that a little bit too, but it's really that zone where he's able to just use that power and use that mobility to his advantage.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that really excites Jets fans about this pick is they have a very young offensive line, and he'd likely be playing next to Elijah Vera Tucker at right guard, who kind of has a similar skill set and honestly I think a similar path, right? Like he played tackle at USC, and with the Jets he's played left tackle, left guard, right tackle, but they finally the last 2 years kind of just put him in at right guard. And I think something that is exciting again for the fan base is they think like, okay, you have a rookie you could just plug next to this guy who's kind of settled in at right guard, and both are kind of both athletic player and can move out in space and have success there.
Yeah, it seemed like a great fit for Membou and just his skill set. When I was looking through some of the landing spots for these Missouri guys, the Jets just kept standing out to me. One, I think the value was right. The spot in the draft was correct. But this is absolutely a system where I think it'll fit well. Or just a roster built, kind of a point in the development of the team and the cohesion there that I think it all fits really well.
Now, I know you mentioned the technique a little bit, but it was curious if there was anything else that you think maybe needs to improve from his game to have success in the NFL.
Yeah, I'd imagine, and this is me speculating a little bit, but I imagine the pass pro might look a little raw at first, and I think that's kind of inherent. He was blocking SEC edges, right? There are a lot of talented edges in the SEC. You saw a lot of them go in the draft this weekend, right? It's another level when you're going up against some of these, especially the like real lean modern edges we're seeing, right? So I think there's just going to be a curve to learning how to do that. That's going to be for every rookie lineman, especially every rookie tackle out there. They have to go through that. His might just be a little more spotlighted because I assume he'll be starting from day one, and that's the expectation. So I imagine that will look a little bit raw there. And who knows, maybe the hand placement will have to get a little bit better on the zone. Some of that stuff we'll have to see. But I think the fact that the athleticism and the familiarity with that scheme being there, that should help speed the process along, I would think.
Now, something a lot of fans usually like to know about these guys is, like what kind of character are they getting, or what kind of guy is Armand Membou? So I was wondering if you could just speak to, kind of how he was in college and, getting to know him over the last few years.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I hope for your sake you get to interview him someday, because he's a hoot to interview. He really is. He's got a great personality. He's not someone who takes himself overly seriously, which I think is always always fun to have in a lineman, and always good to have in a rookie. Like I think he'll be able to go in and have his head down and work right away, but also gel with his teammates really well, because he does have his goofy moments. I think from Missouri's standpoint, he was the comedian of the offensive line. We'll see if that translates. But there were some funny moments where he talked to reporters here about how many elementary school band kids he could block if he needed to, and some of that. So he's a hoot. It'll be a lot of fun watching him over there.
Absolutely. And actually, not the Armand Membou wasn't the only Missouri guy to end up with the Jets. Brady Cook, the quarterback, ended up signing with the Jets as a UDFA. What can you tell us about him, and what's the expectation for him going into the NFL now?
Yeah, this is going to be really interesting to watch, because Brady Cook had a really interesting college career. He's someone who was a St. Louis guy who grew up going to Missouri games. All he wanted to be was Missouri starting quarterback, and he got to be that. He was the starter at Missouri for 3 seasons. 2022, his first season was really, really rough. Not a good season for the team there. They just barely made a bowl game, but it came out after he was playing that season with a torn labrum in his shoulder, so that impacted him there. 2023, he took a massive step forward with this entire Missouri offense. He was someone who all of a sudden he had the deep ball, he had the mobility, he was throwing for 300 yards a game when Missouri needed him to. And then 2024, he regressed, but he also was battling injuries. He had a high ankle sprain during one game where he went to the hospital mid-game for the ankle, came back and won the game for Missouri, missed some time with a hand injury. So he had some injuries there. The grit, 100% there. He's a very gritty guy who wants to stay in the game, who can put his shoulder down and take contact. He's got mobility in terms of escaping the pocket and designed runs. Missouri's go-to third down play was him doing kind of a fake pitch and then just tucking the ball and running right between the guard and the tackle there. He can do that. The deep ball is there from a strength standpoint. Touch is a little questionable just based on this last season, and the production obviously took a step back last season. So he's someone who this is where I thought he would be. Maybe thought he would go in round 7, but probably more likely one of these priority free agents. All he wants is a chance to compete for the job, and we'll see there. It's sort of hard to extrapolate an arm like that and know how it's really going to work at the next level.
Absolutely. And with Justin Fields and Tyrod Taylor on the roster, I'd imagine he's likely competing with Jordan Travis for maybe that third spot on the quarterback depth chart. But for sure, something to watch this summer, right? Like during the preseason and training camp, I'm sure we'll get a good look at Brady Cook. And, obviously Armand Membou too, first round pick. Fans obviously very excited to see him out on the field. I think expectations are very high for him. But, after speaking with you, I think, Jet fans could really be excited about this kid. I would expect him to start from day one, and I think it's going to be a smooth transition to the NFL for him.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a ton of fun to watch. And again, he's just part of what gives him this upside is that he's so young. So the player he is 2 years from now is going to be so much farther along than a lot of these other rookies on the line. And it might take a little bit for that to really be evident, but I think it's going to be very clear.
Absolutely. Eli, I really appreciate you taking the time out today to talk some Missouri football with me on this lovely Monday or Tuesday.
Of course. Thanks for having me.